Hey guys, I was doing some research for a project I'm doing soon for YouTube for you guys, and it was mostly covering Microsoft's Xbox and everything, so it really didn't have much to do with the Switch, which is kind of funny that this came up. And I was kind of looking into the backwards compatibility, and then I had a thought after I read that Microsoft was thinking about possibly being able to do original Xbox games for the Xbox One and the Xbox Scorpio and everything. I had this thought, and I was like, man, wouldn't it be great if Nintendo brought GameCube games back for the Switch? I know they're moving ahead, and what's interesting is, now that they're moving away from the PowerPC architecture with the Wii U, the Wii, and the GameCube, maybe it's about time they start looking back and pulling some of their gems from the GameCube and bringing it up so we could play it portably. And that kind of got me a little worried as well, because now that we're in a completely different architecture, they would have to emulate the thing. So they would have to write basically their own emulator and make it work. But after doing some quick research, very quick, it's typing right in YouTube, it comes up, there are some people who have tested the Dolphin emulator. Now, if you don't know what Dolphin is, it's basically an emulator that some very, very talented people have created, and it lets you play GameCube, Wii, and probably, honestly, soon at this rate, Wii U games. I could see that happening in a bit, but right now we at least have GameCube and we have Wii running perfectly. And what's great about that is you do need kind of a powerful system. At this point, honestly, mid-range maybe. You need like a quad-core processor and a halfway decent GPU, and you can run GameCube and Wii games without too much issue. Now, frame rates can kind of get sketchy depending. Melee is a little harder to run, and of course, when you run Melee, you want high frame rates because that's just how the game plays. So most of the time with those, you need like an i5, i7 maybe, and then a halfway decent GPU, like probably a GTX 760 is probably your lowest bet if you want to have decent looking frames with 1080p and all that good stuff. But what I was thinking, I wonder if the X1 could run this. Remember the X1 from the NVIDIA Shield TV that we talked about briefly? Well, I looked it up, and yeah, it could run it. It actually runs well. I'll actually put some of that stuff up here for you guys so you can see. I know I looked at, like, Batman Begins was on there, there was Need for Speed, Resident Evil 4, they had some other ones like Luigi's Mansion and stuff like that running perfect as well. I believe Sunshine ran great too. But the reason I was worried about this is because when you go to emulate something, it doesn't just work right away. There is so much tweaking, so much work you have to do to make this system basically pretend to be your target system. So in this case, that NVIDIA Shield TV, when you see it playing GameCube games, is essentially pretending to be a GameCube through brute force. So the CPU has to work very hard to recreate the GameCube's architecture and how it ran games. And that's why you always need a more powerful system by a significant amount to run an emulated system. It's always been that way. PS2 just recently became like almost 100%, and that's how long it's taken. And we'll probably honestly never see, well, I don't want to say never, but it's going to be a long time before we see PS3 and 360 become an actual emulated system. There's a couple people working on PS3 stuff now, but the way that cell is, man, that cell CPU is going to be a pain to program for and figure out. But back on topic, I was thinking that possibly, if Nintendo looked at this and said, man, how awesome would it be if we could release games we've already made after we create an emulator for it, and these people can basically download these games and we can just sell it to them again. Through a business point, that makes sense. If they have the ability, which I can tell you now they do, to make an emulator, there's no reason not to. And keep in mind, these GameCube games, when they came out, there was a kind of a weird feeling because they're using much smaller game discs. At the time, they were using the mini DVDs rather than the large DVDs. I'm still not really sure why. I don't know if they thought it'd be a good idea for loading times to be decreased, or if they thought piracy would be harder because you're using a different type of disc, but you could get mini DVDs easy, so it wasn't a big deal. But basically these DVDs held, I want to say 1.5 gigs. I think it was like 1.5 gigs. And that was all they really needed for some of them. Sunshine fit on one disc, Mario Kart fit on one disc, Luigi's Mansion fit on one disc, Melee fit on one disc. So there were some third-party games like Resident Evil, like Chaos Theory, Twin Snakes actually was on 2 discs as well. There were some games that needed more than that, but they got around it by splitting it up into 2 discs. But my thought was, if they release it on the eShop, maybe it's finally time they do this, because when we go to download Mario Sunshine, we're only going to be downloading 1 to 1.2 gigs of data, and nowadays that's not a lot. You can sit down probably with your Switch and download it in 15, 20 minutes, maybe at the most, depending on server status, of course. And I'm sure they could probably add a bunch of cool things now that we see that the X1, which is going to be less powerful than what we're dealing with by, from all reports, a decent amount. I don't see any reason why this isn't the time for Nintendo to start getting those GameCubes back out, you know, dust them off and start releasing these games back into the wild. Because we could, how great would it be if we go on the shop and we could download a Mario Sunshine, we can download a Melee, we can download Resident Evil 4 if we want Resident Evil 4 for it, you know, we can download Beautiful Joe, which was an awesome game, Metroid Prime, the list goes on for GameCube. And I don't know if they would ever release Wii games for it, they could, but the fact that they're willing to port Wii U games over tells me that they are willing to take games from the past and bring them up for them to make money on, and honestly it would make us as a fan base happy because there are some awesome games I would love to play portably, even like on the go. How crazy would that be? We can go on like trips and have this thing with us and have GameCube games with us. That'd be so cool. So I personally think that they should do that. I think it'd be awesome. The money's there. It makes sense. It's easy to market because it's another Mario game that you just essentially put on the system. But let me know what you guys think down below. You think GameCube games would be awesome on the system? I think it'd be great. I mean, I don't see why not. How many of us would probably download a Pokemon XD or a Mario Sunshine or a Beautiful Joe right away? Or Eternal Darkness. There's so many games. Like I said, there's so many games. And licensing issues might be there, but I'm sure other companies like Capcom and stuff would not mind taking a cut of that, so it's possible. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and let me know what your favorite GameCube games were back in the day that you would love to see on the Switch. So yeah guys, I will see you next time.